Live. I have a special guest this week, Amitai Ratzon, who we tried to have before and circumstances didn't permit. So really glad to have him here with us today. He is the CEO of Pentera, which is a company that focuses on automated security validation, and they deal with real-time exposures at scale. They recently announced $150 million in funding, making it, I'm told, the first new cyber unicorn of 2022. Welcome so much, and thanks for making time to be with us today, Amitai.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
Great, terrific. Well, maybe we could just start and you could tell me a little bit about Pentera. I want to talk about you and your leadership here in a bit, but let's start with sort of the bigger company overview and what is the company, what does it do?
Yeah, thank you. So Pentera is today the category leader in the field of automated security validation. We're a technology company, a cybersecurity technology company that basically was invented to remove assumptions from the chief security officer's desk, debating whether we are or we are not ready for the moment of truth when the worst of attacks would happen. Are we prepared? How do we know? So big companies, big enterprises equip themselves, as everyone knows, with antiviruses, firewalls, EDRs, NDRs. They have best of breed in everything they do. They pay millions of dollars for security stack. But the main question remains unanswered. Are you sure or are you confident that in the moment of truth, all of that kind of orchestra would survive a brutal cyber attack, yes or no? And that's what Pentera is here to do. Pentera is an agentless technology that with a click of a button would launch a mega attack against a company's infrastructure, which is safe by design, believe it or not. We came out with this provocative concept something like 4 years ago when the market was already used to other more kind of sterile approaches,
Passive.
more kind of risk-averse approaches. People said, we would install hundreds and thousands of agents in the network, which are little spies that would allow the enterprise to kind of try to do simulations of all sorts. Pentera remove simulations, we remove assumptions. By attacking the network for real, we kind of isolate the truth. What is the root cause? Because thanks to which you cannot sleep well at night.
Yeah.
And then it's a repetitive thing. We run it, you remediate, we run it again. And it's all pure technology, no human beings are involved.
Cool. So as you say, that's quite counterintuitive that I want you to actually attack my system, but you don't actually take systems down through the attack, correct?
Exactly. Of course we don't. And when we say we do stuff, so Pentera as a company doesn't do anything. Once we deploy Pentera, the user, the chief security officer and team of the company, they're actually clicking the buttons. We don't do anything. It's completely the possession of the customer. And obviously it is safe by design. We've designed the safety mechanisms to allow this to work in production at Fortune 1000 companies. And we're very lucky. We're actually going to celebrate customer number 500 in production in the next
Congrats.
week or two. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I just want to add a little more clarity. So the attack is launched and the person's in control, the internal person's in control. They launch the attack and then there's a vulnerability that's found. And then does the system just flag the vulnerability? Is that what happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the attack is being launched and Pentera basically tries, millions way in from inside out, outside in. And at the end of the attack, we're surfacing what you need to do about like the findings. So the findings would either be, 10 or 15 vulnerabilities, network misconfigurations, a combination of both, but it's never 1,000, 2,000 things you need to do. It's always like, what are those 10, 15 things you need to do now so that the results we were able to achieve 5 minutes ago wouldn't happen again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Once you remediate and you attend to what we say you need to do, then you run Pentera again, and it's like an ongoing thing, and you fight against yourself. You get a score from Pentera. It's like a trainer. So some companies call this the X-ray of the IT environment. You run Pentera, you improve, you run it again, you improve again, till you come to a point where you feel quite good about yourself, and then you acquire a company or you hire 100 employees and then the mess starts again. That's why you need this watchdog to be there for you, with you.
Great. Terrific. Well, thanks for putting that in sort of layman's terms so people who aren't in the field can understand. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about your background. You didn't come into this job with a big formal cyber or tech experience. the research I have says you were an Army captain as well as a door-to-door salesman. I think you went on to expand that role a little bit for the Jewish Yellow Pages in New York City. What led you into cybersecurity? How did that happen?
Yeah, funny that you mentioned my childhood memories when I was like out of the, in Israel, we go to the army. So after my service as a captain in the Israeli paratroopers that I'm very, very proud of,
Mm.
I went to travel like us Israelis, we go travel South America, Far East, etc. Then I found myself in New York to survive, to just get it by the day. I found a job that I'm very proud of still selling Yellow Pages advertisements in the tri-state area. It was pre-internet. So opening a Yellow Pages, paper Yellow Pages, and calling on people to come and close them, etc. So that's kind of when I realized that doesn't matter what I do in my life afterwards, I'm never going to be unemployed, because when you know how to sell,
Yeah.
unemployment is not a problem for you. Then I kind of came back. I studied law and business in Israel, and I went to a Kellogg Rekanati executive MBA, and I've taken on some hardcore sales jobs at fintech and insurtech companies. Super Derivative that was acquired by the New York Stock Exchange for $350 million. Then I was the
Congratulations.
VP of sales at Earnix that got the unicorn status last year. And those experiences, I think, have shaped me as a sales leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I also kind of came to realize that to be a CEO, you need to know a lot about sales. And it's not just selling to a customer,
Yeah.
it's selling to investors, to the ecosystem, to analysts, to executives. And that's kind of how I kind of where my credibility is coming from. And I was very fortunate that the two co-founders of Pentera approached me in 2017. Arik Feingold, co-founder, and Arik Liberson, CTO, still works in the company up until now, and my partner in crime is like the brain behind what we do.
Mm-hmm.
He is the classic tech guy that was the head of a very prestige red teaming unit in the Israeli army that had to protect the country of Israel from nation state attacks.
Mm.
So to protect against like all kinds of superpowers, Arik and team were launching pen tests and red team activities, and Arik saw all the deficiencies with manual pen testing. And since he is an engineer by education and by profession, he kind of took everything he knew about red teaming, pen testing, put it into machine language,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of teamed up in 2018. And we kind of this was like a dream situation for me, because I didn't write a line of code in my life. Arik is not an enterprise sales guy that kind of came from the industry. So we're like the mother and father of this company, and our relationship is really amazing. And soon after, we've hired Ran Tamir, Chief Product Officer, Aviv Cohen, Chief Marketing Officer. And it's the four of us that kind of walked in the desert and came with mutually exclusive professions to one another. That kind of this was like the beginning of Pentera, and us taking the company out of stealth was like an amazing thing. We kind of taught each other, and each one filled out kind of the other person's gaps.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. You're an Insight portfolio company now, right? Insight is one
I'm
of your
so,
investors. Insight,
yeah,
yeah,
Inside Partners
yeah,
have invested in round B, and we're very, very proud of that.
yes. I work with another CEO with a sales background who's an Insight portfolio company. It's a phenomenal recipe to have these technical founders or founders with a sales CEO partnered, not on top, but partnered, and then to bring in all the other skills that you need. It's
Yeah, I mean,
phenomenal.
I would, Karen, I would add to that. Great technology is great, but it will take you only so far and
Hmm.
so much. And there is, as I sometimes say, and I'm not happy to say that, but there is a graveyard of amazing technologies with amazing technical founders out there. And I think that very soon, even technical founders, whether they like it or not, they need to make decisions on, okay, what's our go-to market? Okay, you founded and you've invented that amazing product, but what is the go to market? Are we selling through channels? One tier, two tier? Where exactly? Channels in Germany is not channel in Atlanta, and it's not channel in Dallas, and it's not channel in the UK. I mean, what is the price? What is the discount policy? How do we hire the sales guys? How do we motivate them? How do we incentivize them? This has nothing to do with technical background, but very, very soon you have to have an opinion about all of those matters. And
Yes.
if this is not your bread and butter, then what are you going to do? And many, in my opinion, many companies fall on their face, because then they hire a hired VP of sales early on that probably doesn't have enough skin in the game to care as the founders.
Hmm.
And there we go. And there we see all kinds of situations which are not optimal.
Hmm.
Yeah, that you see a VP of sales who doesn't have skin in the game like a founder that needs to invent the business that the founders cannot themselves.
Mhm.
So I would give the credit to the Pentera founders that we've teamed up,
Yes.
and this synergy between us, kind of, how we complement each other, basically overcomes all these like potential catastrophes that 9 out of 10 companies go through.
Mm. So this willingness to partner and trust with someone who
Yeah.
has a skill set that you don't have. In fact, sometimes it's a blind spot for you. How did you form that trust, or is it just you think the basic nature of the people
Yeah,
in the system?
that is a great question, and to be honest, when I've joined Pentera, the board told me, "Okay, Amitai, we knew you were a top performing sales manager, sales VP elsewhere. At Pentera, it's your second day, you haven't sold anything." So I kind of took the humble approach of like, what's a CEO at a company with 5 people? You don't need to be like you're not a McKinsey guy, right? You need to go and bring logos and logos and logos, or else there is no business. I mean, so when I hear the CEOs of small companies talk about strategy and like long-term planning, it makes me laugh. At the beginning, the CEO in my textbook needs to be the sales guy. You need to sell and bring net new logos to the business, develop, what the price look like, what the POC looks like, etc., etc. So I've earned the trust of my partners by being great at what I do, just like they did.
Mhm.
They earned their trust from me when I saw how amazing they are writing code and developing the product. So we each focused on what we were very good at without interfering too much in each other's job. It's very heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So I've earned my trust upon like my own successes at Pentera, sleeves down, like not talking CEO bullshit. Sorry for my French, but just being like
Sounds like
the
American, but we'll go with
yeah.
French.
I mean, by being like the rep in the street that hits
Yes.
the road without like all the niceties of a CEO, and because I knew back then that if I'm not gonna be able myself to land the first 20, 30 logos, I'm not gonna have a face to hire a VP of sales and ask them to do what I didn't do myself. How can you do that?
Yeah. Well said. So there's often a lot of, or a bit, sometimes a lot of conflict between sales and development, which you may have experienced in your previous roles, if not in this one. How do you manage that between yourself and the
Yeah.
founders?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, me and the founder, Alec Libelson, we're just, as I said, we're best buddies. We work a lot on our relationship. When we don't have time to meet during the day, we have like a monthly lunch when we sit in restaurants in Tel
Nice.
Aviv till like 4 a.m. in the morning. But when you talk about the company as a whole, we have integrated R&D here and product into the field work. So at Pentera, R&D, and we call them RDP, R&D and product. They
Mm,
are as instrumental
love
to
that.
closing the month and closing the quarter as the salespeople. Unlike other companies where you have those R&D guys that write code and don't know what's happening in the field, at Pentera it's the extreme opposite. The R&D team have kind of developed the POC methodology, how we prove the concept. It was developed by them. Then they've handed the torch to the sales engineering organization, and product management is very much involved in the field. They
Mhm.
travel, they're interested, they care. Everyone in Pentera is getting a very lucrative amount of stock options. So we make the company like everyone's company. So
Yes.
everyone truly cares because they have the, I would say, the financial incentive, but also
Mhm.
like the incentive because they feel that it's part of the family and it's theirs and they want this to succeed, as opposed to like R&D looking at the guys in the field saying, this is a different company. So we try to work on this one team concept very, very hard because it doesn't happen without work. Just like relationship, it doesn't happen without work.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you manage those conflicts when they come up? How do you do the work?
So I think it requires lots of emotional intelligence, and it requires, sometimes I tell my leaders, now in this conversation, in this conflict, you wear this guy's hat and you speak like you're him or her. And that's it. I don't want to hear what you think about your kind of angle because I know that. Now your job is to talk like you're this guy, and that's it. And then you see people kind of say, "Oh my God, that's like I can do that, but that's against like the reason I came to this room." So I would say, first of all, putting things on the table,
Mhm.
being very open, understanding that at the end of the day, the root causes it comes down to, it could be ego, it could be people want credit, they want to not be forgotten that they have contributed. So in my kind of philosophy, you really need to understand what matters to people. Some people care about prestige, some care about high work ethics. Some people care about just the extra buck. You need to understand what motivates people so that when they come into a conflict, me and my leaders, we come into the conflict resolution with that in mind, because not everyone is the same. Different people want different things.
So I just hear your sales background sort of oozing out in everything you say, because that's, of course, what you have to do to be successful in sales or enterprise sales or relationships in general. I think it's just another way of understanding what makes someone who has a sales background be so successful as a CEO. Was there anything difficult for you in transitioning into this role?
Yes. So early on, when I took on the CEO position, although it's 4.5 years, it looks like I've been doing it since I was a teenager because it's so intense, right? But when I try to reflect back on my VP of global sales positions versus this one, obviously, when you're head of sales, you're in the line of fire, you need to deliver results. It's only about like this month and this quarter
Mm-hmm.
and the numbers and sales cadence and sales force, which is stuff I love and like.
Yeah.
However, the main kind of transition for me was truly understanding the R&D perspective. Like the balance sheet kind of hits you when you're a CEO, and you can achieve stuff that the balance sheet allows you. And I think the one thing that was the most interesting to me to kind of realize is that when you look up, you don't see anyone.
Right.
There isn't this responsible adult that you used to see since you got out of school that always knew more or was more responsible or was more mature or so more in their lives. All of a sudden, it's you. Whether you feel that you're this guy or not, it doesn't matter. People look at you like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to fake it till you make it, right? So I think at the beginning, it was a bit strange for me to be this guy for all the talented people we were able to bring in. With time, it became more natural, but it wasn't natural at all for me at the beginning to be in charge of the R&D function, finance function, HR. I think you need to come with a certain amount of humility and be humble, and you can't just be Mr. Know-all pretending you know, because I don't. You
Yeah.
don't know everything about everything because you're the CEO. You simply don't. And my style is always hiring the best of the best, giving them wings to perform, and trying to not be too opinionated about stuff that you don't really understand about.
Yeah.
Why won't you take a step back, listen, absorb, and potentially, you don't have also to make all the decisions. Sometimes other people make those decisions. I've seen some CEOs in my life that were very opinionated, try to know about everything, bypass like leaders under them
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that people said you're too close to the sun, you can't survive, you need to live. So I try to be this servant leader, if you want, for
Yes, of
my team.
course. Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at my leadership.
Yeah, no, because no CEO can be omniscient, right? No matter how big the ego, you cannot know everything. And I
No.
think you bring up such a good point about not having anyone to look up. You also don't have any peers to lean on, right? It's a very unique position
Yeah.
in the corporate hierarchy. Yeah.
So I have my wife, Dafna. She is amazing. She is an electrical engineer by profession, an MBA, and my best friend in the world. And yeah, late at night when I have those like hard dilemmas, mainly I get like this emotional about the business when it's about people and it's about people's destiny.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I kind of sometimes talk to her and my management team. I look at them as my friends. I don't look at them as like I'm here and you're all there and I can't
Right.
speak to you. So I have a group of people that are on my management team, and I feel very open to come to them for advice and be vulnerable in front of them because you need to, so that they're vulnerable with you. Otherwise, they wouldn't share anything. So I'm trying to share with them, show them how difficult it is sometimes, get their advice, so I don't feel like I'm alone.
It's great. It's really great. Speaking of not alone, I think you told me you were taking a little break from your sales conference right now to do this with us. Maybe you could say a few words about that, sort of what the future holds for Pentera and any
Yes.
big trends in the industry as you see them.
Yeah. So that's a great question. First of all, Pentera is a miracle. 3.5 years ago, it was just another promising venture, and who knew if it would become anything. So I actually read an article that said that the likelihood of a startup like Pentera 3.5 years ago to become what we have become is 0.006%. So the fact we are here talking in this context is a miracle. We've raised $150 million at a billion valuation just 4 months ago. Since then, we've seen the markets were somewhat turbulent, and people have all kinds of interpretations for the future, etc. At this point, when we talk to Insight Partners, Blackstone, Oz Ventures, K1, Evolution, our board members, our decision is to really focus on execution.
Mm.
We don't need to raise money at this point. The company is well funded for the next few years. It's not about funding at this point. Um, Going public for Pentera, that's not like an end by itself. There is no dream that we have to go public. We don't think of it as a dream. It could be a milestone on the way, but it also might not be the milestone that we would pursue. It could be that that's going to be a 2024 thing, going public, given that the markets are stable and that the valuations are attractive enough.
Mm-hmm.
But Pentera really, like if you look at where we want to be, when it comes to the financial kind of outcome, we want to be $100 million in sales company in a year and a half. We're on the way there. We want to be a company that is a category leader, like the world leader in automated security validation. We want any CISO in the world to think of us when they think of how are we going to survive tomorrow's attack?
Mm.
Does the stack work well together? Yes or no? Once we have created this association in CISO's brains with Pentera, and the more we expand, now we're expanding to Latin America and Asia Pacific, good things would happen to this company. And IPO is the probable situation in 2024. Once again, let's see where the markets are going to be and what's going to be the impact of the current crisis. I could already say that when it comes to the progression of Pentera, we're like a very green stock in a very red ocean of like collapsing tech companies at this point. And we're very lucky that we're not public because, I mean, our stock
Right.
just goes up.
Yeah.
We're just selling more. We're 96% retention of customers. So we're like a green stock in among many like red stocks that are out there public.
Yeah. Well, congrats on that customer retention number. That's amazing. Um, so, as you think about your industry, what do you see as trends in the industry?
Yeah. So we kind of think that the industry where we play kind of is looking at convergence.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that small companies that before 2022 were not able to make a big impact in terms of annual recurring revenue,
Mm-hmm.
those companies that see struggling from a few hundred thousands to the very few millions will probably need to prove themselves really well to actually be entitled for like the big checks we've seen in 2021.
Yes.
I actually feel that also because of the calls we get from bankers to acquire company A or company B that a year ago we thought was competing with us. We think that with time, breach attack simulation, EASM, risk-based vulnerability management would all converge into our category. We think that automated security validation would be the dominant one. We
Mm.
definitely expect Gartner to acknowledge that. That's a category, that's a name we have coined, automated security validation. We think it resembles what we do in a better way. We hope that the market would pick that up and actually make that the standard. I actually think that our business goes to like consolidation. It's going to be the winner takes it all. I don't think that there's a room in our space to 15 vendors doing like small kind of variations of Pentera. We think there's a room for one or two, maximum three players that are going to be dominant because the market is big enough.
Great. Well, create, name, and dominate the category. There's a vision. You could hear that on the sales stage. So just to wrap up, I always ask a question of my guests. My consulting business has a tagline, which is up and to the right, because that's the spot on a 2x2 matrix where we always want to be, is in that upper right-hand box, speaking of Gartner. Was there a moment in your career when you knew that you were moving up and to the right, that you were moving in that direction from a career standpoint?
Yeah, I would actually look at, I think, three moments in
Mm.
my career. I'll say them quite fast. One was when I was like a rep in the Jewish Yellow Pages back in 1999. I was just in New York, like a young person selling, advertisements of a few $1,000s. I remember myself like coming back after closing three deals, going out of the subway station in Times Square, looking at all these buildings and telling myself, I mean, wow, you have a new profession. You're probably one of the best sales guys in New York. Although I was very young and actually thought that. That was 20 something years ago. The second point, I think, was when I won the best salesperson worldwide for super derivatives in 2008.
Wow.
400 people, CEO put me on stage and kind of spoke about me. I said, wow, so humbling from all of these guys. And I think the third kind of situation is probably when we got the Blackstone investment in 2019.
Sure.
We were like an unknown small company from Israel. And then Mighty Blackstone invests in us and says, yeah, we trust you. Credit goes to Adam Fletcher, Global CISO at Blackstone, that believed in us back then. They're still on our board. Then that's when I knew that I'm playing in the big league at Pentera, and that there's no stopping for this business.
Yeah, right. Wonderful validation. Well, thank you so much, Amitai, for making time for us today and sharing both your leadership perspectives as well as a lot about this industry, which I just think is fascinating. So thank you again, and take good care.
Thank you very much, Karen. Appreciate the time.